Millionaire boss sees his daughter and a doorman, and the most shocking moment of his life unfolds right there. Richard Miller felt the world stop when he heard that crystal-clear voice echoing through the lobby of the office building. His 5-year-old daughter Emily ran toward the doorman, shouting a word he never imagined would come from her lips. "Daddy!" she cried, throwing herself into the arms of the uniformed man who worked at the building's entrance. The businessman froze on the spot. 3 years earlier, he had fired that man from their home and paid a considerable sum to make him disappear from their lives forever. Emily, diagnosed with selective mutism as a baby, had never uttered a single word until that moment. Seeing his daughter speak for the first time should have been a moment of pure joy, but the situation left him in complete shock. Michael Johnson, the doorman, hugged the little girl back, tears streaming down his face. His hands trembled as he held her gently, as if she were made of glass. Across the lobby, Melissa, Richard's personal assistant, dropped all the documents she was carrying, staring at the scene with wide eyes. "Emily, my sweet girl," Michael murmured, his voice choked with emotion. "How you've grown." Richard remained still, trying to process what was happening. That man had been the family's private driver for 2 years when Emily was a baby. Over time, a special bond had formed between them, one that deeply unsettled the businessman. Michael had a gift for calming the girl when she cried, could make her smile even on the hardest days, and spent hours trying to encourage her to speak through songs and games. When Richard discovered the driver was teaching Emily communication techniques to overcome her mutism, he fired him immediately. To him, it was an invasion of territory, an attempt to usurp his role as a father. The little girl stopped eating for weeks after Michael left. Her pediatrician warned of signs of childhood depression, but Richard ignored the warnings, convinced he was doing what was best for his daughter. Now, 3 years later, seeing Michael working as a doorman in his own office building made Richard realize he had been deceived by someone very close to him. "Emily, come here right now," Richard said, trying to keep his voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions. The little girl turned her face to her father, her blue eyes shining with happiness. For the first time in her life, she spoke to him too. "Daddy Michael missed me," she said, her melodic voice filling the room. "He said he never forgot me." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like the video and especially to subscribe to the channel. It helps us newcomers a lot. Now back to the story. Richard felt his legs weaken. Hearing his daughter's voice was a miracle he had waited 5 long years for. But discovering her first words were directed at another man shattered him completely. Michael sensed the discomfort of the situation and gently set Emily down. "Emily, you need to go with your daddy now," Michael said, kneeling to meet her eye level. "He must be worried about you." "But I want to stay here with you," Emily replied, gripping Michael's hand tightly. "Can I play here for a little while?" The child's innocence contrasted with the tension that had settled in the room. Other building employees began to gather, curious about the commotion. Richard realized he was being watched and tried to regain control of the situation. "Emily, we have to go," he said, reaching for his daughter. "Mommy is waiting at home." "Mommy is traveling again," Emily answered, shaking her head. "She won't be back until Sunday." Michael looked at Richard with an expression of surprise and concern. During the time he had worked for the family, Jennifer, Richard's wife, was constantly traveling for work, leaving Emily in the care of nannies and staff. "Mr. Richard," Michael said respectfully, removing his cap, "I didn't know your wife had traveled again. Was Emily alone in the building?" "She was with the nanny," Richard replied coldly, "and it's none of your business where my wife is." "Daddy, why are you mad?" Emily asked, noticing the shift in her father's tone. "Uncle Michael was just being nice to me." Richard looked at his daughter and saw tears forming in her eyes. The last thing he wanted was to make Emily cry, just as she had finally started speaking. He took a deep breath and tried to soften his voice. "I'm not mad, Princess," he said, kneeling beside Emily. "Daddy was just surprised to hear you talking." "I learned to talk by thinking of Uncle Michael," Emily said, looking affectionately at the doorman. "Every night I talk to him in my head." The little girl's words hit Richard like a punch to the gut. All these years, he had sought out the best specialists, the most advanced therapies, spent fortunes trying to get Emily to speak. And she had saved her first words for the man he had pushed out of their lives. Michael remained silent, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. He knew his presence was causing trouble and tried to find a way to leave without hurting Emily. "Emily," Michael said gently, "you need to go with your daddy now. I have to work." "But can I come visit you tomorrow?" the girl asked, her eyes full of hope. "We'll talk about this at home," Richard interrupted, scooping Emily into his arms. "Now let's go." As he walked toward the elevators, Richard could feel Michael's gaze burning into his back. He knew this conversation wasn't over and that he needed to figure out how his former driver had gotten a job in his building. In the elevator, Emily stayed quiet, but her eyes spoke for her. Richard could see sadness taking over his daughter's little face, and it made him feel like the worst father in the world. How could he explain to a 5-year-old why he didn't want her near Michael? When they reached the penthouse, Richard immediately called his mother, Mrs. Elizabeth Miller, a 72-year-old woman who always had strong opinions about every family matter. "Mum, I need to talk to you urgently," Richard said as soon as she answered. "What happened, son?" Mrs. Elizabeth asked, hearing the distress in his voice. "Emily spoke today," Richard said, trying to contain his emotions. "My God, that's wonderful!" the grandmother exclaimed. "What were her first words?" Richard hesitated before answering. He knew his mother had never agreed with his decision to remove Michael from Emily's life. She called someone else Daddy," he finally said. The silence on the other end was deafening. Mrs. Elizabeth took a few seconds to process the information before responding. "Are you talking about Michael?" she asked, her voice a mix of joy and disapproval. "You knew he was working in my building?" Richard questioned, already suspecting the answer. "Of course I knew," Mrs. Elizabeth replied bluntly. "I'm the one who got him the job." Richard felt his blood boil. His own mother had conspired against him, bringing Michael back into Emily's life behind his back. "How could you do this to me?" Richard asked, keeping his voice low so Emily wouldn't hear. "I did it for my granddaughter's sake," Mrs. Elizabeth answered firmly. "Did you see what happened when you took Michael out of her life? Emily stopped eating, stopped playing. She was apathetic for months. And now look, on the very first day she sees him again, she finally speaks. That doesn't give you the right to make decisions about my daughter behind my back," Richard shot back. "Someone had to take sensible action," said Mrs. Elizabeth Miller. "You were so blinded by your pride that you couldn't see your own daughter's suffering." "Emily, where are you?" Richard called, searching for the little girl who had vanished from the room. He found her in her bedroom, sitting on the bed, clutching her favorite stuffed bear. Silent tears streamed down her face. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" Richard asked, sitting beside her. "Did I do something bad?" Emily asked, her voice trembling. "Did Daddy not like that I talked to Uncle Michael?" Richard felt his heart shatter. How could he explain the full complexity of the situation to a 5-year-old? How could he talk about his fear of losing her, his jealousy, his need to be the only important man in her life? "You didn't do anything wrong, my love," he said, hugging Emily. "Daddy was so happy to hear your voice for the first time." "Then why were you mad at Uncle Michael?" Emily pressed. "Sometimes grown-ups get confused by their own feelings," Richard tried to explain. "But that's not your fault." Emily nestled into her father's arms, and for the first time in years, Richard felt like maybe he was doing something right. Hearing his daughter's voice, even if it was directed at another man, was a gift he wasn't sure he deserved. That night, after Emily fell asleep, Richard called Jennifer in Washington, D.C., where she was attending an architecture conference. "Jennifer, Emily spoke today," he said as soon as she answered. "What? What do you mean she spoke?" Jennifer asked, clearly stunned. "Her first words, and she called someone else Daddy," Richard said, his voice heavy with pain. Jennifer was silent for a moment before responding. "You're talking about Michael, aren't you?" she said calmly. "You knew he was working in the building too?" Richard asked, already anticipating the answer. "Not only did I know, I supported your mother's decision," Jennifer admitted. "Richard, Emily needed him. Anyone could see that, except you." How could you all do this to me? Richard asked, feeling betrayed by every woman in his life. Because someone had to think about Emily's well-being, Jennifer replied firmly. You were so obsessed with being her only father that you didn't see how much she was hurting. I am her father, Richard said, his voice breaking. And you still are, Jennifer answered softly. But sometimes children need more than one father figure in their lives. Michael never tried to replace you, Richard. He just loved Emily as if she were his own. After hanging up, Richard stood alone in the living room, reflecting on everything that had happened. For the first time in 3 years, he was being forced to confront his own insecurities and fears. The next morning, Richard woke with renewed determination. He needed to talk to Michael and understand exactly what was going on. He left Emily with the babysitter and went down to the lobby of the building. Michael was at his post, greeting employees arriving for another workday. When he saw Richard approaching, his posture stiffened slightly. Good morning, Mr. Miller, Michael said respectfully. We need to talk, Richard said curtly. Now. Michael glanced around, checking for a private place where they could speak uninterrupted. We can use the superintendent's office, Michael suggested. It's empty at this hour. The two men walked in silence to the small back office of the building. Richard closed the door behind him and turned to face Michael. I want you to explain how you got this job, Richard said, getting straight to the point. Mrs. Elizabeth approached me 6 months ago, Michael answered honestly. She said there was an opening for a doorman here and thought it would be good for me. And you accepted knowing this is my building? Richard questioned. I needed the job, Mr. Richard, Michael said, keeping his gaze steady. My mother is sick and needs expensive medication. My nephews depend on me ever since she passed. Richard felt a slight discomfort, realizing he knew nothing about Michael's personal life. In the 2 years the man had worked in his home, he'd never cared to know him beyond his professional duties. Why didn't you tell me about your family situation back then? Richard asked, his voice slightly softer. You never asked, Michael replied simply. And I didn't think it was appropriate to mix personal life with work. What about Emily? Richard pressed, getting to what bothered him most. Did you plan this reunion? Of course not, Michael answered, seeming genuinely offended by the suggestion. I worked the morning shift specifically to avoid this happening. I never imagined she'd come here during my hours. Then how did she find you? Richard insisted. The nanny brought her here yesterday to pick up some documents from your office, Michael explained. Emily must have seen me when she passed through the lobby. Richard processed the information, trying to separate his emotions from the facts. Michael hadn't planned the reunion, but he also hadn't done anything to prevent it when it happened. Michael, I need you to understand something, Richard said, choosing his words carefully. Emily is my daughter. I know you two had a special bond, but she is my responsibility. I never questioned that, Mr. Richard, Michael replied. The whole time I worked in your home, I always respected that you were her father. Then why does she call you Daddy? Richard asked, the pain evident in his voice. Michael sighed deeply before answering. When Emily was a baby, she started calling me that because I spent so much time with her, he explained. I tried correcting her many times, but she was too little to understand. When she got a bit older, I thought about talking to you about it, but what? Richard pressed. But you were always so busy, Michael said hesitantly, and I didn't want to cause unnecessary trouble. You should have told me, Richard said. Maybe, Michael agreed, but you never showed interest in hearing about these things. Every time I tried to talk about Emily's progress, you'd change the subject or say you were in a hurry. Michael's words struck Richard like a painful revelation. He remembered several times when he'd dismissed the driver for trying to share observations about Emily. Back then, he thought Michael was overstepping professional boundaries. I was trying to protect my daughter, Richard said, his defensiveness sounding weak even to himself. Protect her from what, Mr. Richard? Michael asked gently. From someone who loved her? The question hung in the air between them. Richard didn't have a convincing answer because deep down he knew Michael was right. He wasn't protecting Emily from real danger. He was protecting himself from the fear of being replaced. Dear listener, If you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. "I need time to think about all this," Richard finally said. "Of course, Mr. Richard." "Richard," Michael replied, "but can I make a request?" "What request?" Richard asked, suspicious. "If it's possible, I'd like to keep watching Emily grow up," Michael said, his voice thick with emotion. "It doesn't have to be like before. It could just be as the doorman who greets her when she passes by. But yesterday, when I heard her voice for the first time..." Michael couldn't finish the sentence. Tears began streaming down his face, and he quickly wiped them away, embarrassed to show emotion in front of Richard. "I'm sorry, Mr. Richard," Michael said. "I know I have no right to ask this." Richard studied the man before him and saw genuine pain that mirrored his own. Michael wasn't trying to steal his daughter. He simply loved Emily and missed her. "I'll think about your request," Richard said, surprising himself with the answer. "Thank you, Mr. Richard," Michael said, clearly relieved. "That means a lot to me." When Richard returned to the apartment, he found Emily sitting at the kitchen table, having breakfast with her nanny, Dorothy, a 55-year-old woman who had cared for the girl for 2 years. "Daddy!" Emily exclaimed when she saw him, running to hug him. "Did you talk to Uncle Michael?" "I did," Richard replied, surprised that Emily had retained her ability to speak after the encounter the day before. "Can he come play with me?" Emily asked hopefully. "Emily, Uncle Michael has to work," Richard explained. "He can't leave work just to play." "But can he come here when he's not working?" the girl insisted. Richard looked at Dorothy, who had witnessed Emily's entire transformation over the past 2 days. Sensing his hesitation, the nanny decided to step in. "Mr. Richard, may I say something?" Dorothy asked respectfully. "Of course, Dorothy," Richard replied. "In 2 years of caring for Emily, I've never seen her as talkative and lively as she is now," the nanny said. "Whatever happened yesterday did her a world of good." "Is Emily really that different?" Richard asked. "Very different," Dorothy confirmed. "Last night she told me about her day for the first time. This morning she woke up humming. It's like she's been reborn." Richard watched Emily, who was playing with her doll while whispering to it. It was true. The girl seemed more alive, more present. For years he had grown used to her silence, forgetting how a 5-year-old should be. That afternoon, Richard had an important meeting with Japanese investors, considering a partnership with his construction company. It was a deal worth millions, and he had meticulously prepared for the presentation. Midway through the meeting, Dorothy appeared at the conference room door, her face panicked. "Mr. Richard, I need to speak with you urgently," she said, clearly distressed. "Dorothy, I'm in an important meeting," Richard said, embarrassed in front of the investors. "Can it wait?" "It's about Emily," Dorothy said, and Richard immediately knew something was wrong. "Excuse me, gentlemen," Richard told the investors. "I'll be back in 2 minutes." He left the room with Dorothy, who quickly explained the situation. "Emily is missing, Mr. Richard," she said, nearly in tears. "She was playing in her room. I went to get a glass of water from the kitchen, and when I came back, she was gone." "What do you mean, missing?" Richard asked, panic setting in. "She couldn't have left the apartment." "I've searched every room," Dorothy said. "She's nowhere." Richard rushed to the apartment, leaving the meeting behind. He searched every corner of the penthouse, calling Emily's name, checking every possible hiding spot. After 20 minutes of desperate searching, a terrible suspicion began to form in his mind. "Dorothy, check if the apartment door was unlocked," he said. The nanny rushed to the door and checked the lock. "It's unlocked, Mr. Richard," she said, her voice faltering. "But I'm sure I locked it when we got here." "Does Emily know how to use the elevator?" Richard asked, already running toward the hallway. "She's seen me press the buttons many times," Dorothy replied, following him. "Oh God, could she have..." Richard forcefully pressed the elevator button, his mind racing through all the terrible possibilities that could happen to a 5-year-old lost in a commercial building. When they reached the ground floor, Richard ran to the reception desk where Michael was working. The doorman immediately noticed the desperation on the businessman's face. "Mr. Richard, what's wrong?" Michael asked, standing up at once. "Emily disappeared from the apartment," Richard said, panting. Did you see her come down? No, but I had to step away from the desk for a few minutes to handle an issue in the parking lot, Michael replied. When was that? About half an hour ago, Richard said, already pulling out his phone to call security. Wait, Michael said, placing a hand on Richard's arm. Before calling security, let me think about where she might be. How could you possibly know where she is? Richard asked, irritated by the delay. Because I know Emily, Michael answered calmly. For 2 years, I've learned how she thinks, where she likes to hide when she's upset or confused. Richard hesitated. His first instinct was to call the entire building security team, maybe even the police. But Michael understood Emily in a way he himself was still discovering. Where do you think she could be? Richard asked. She likes small, cozy places when she's upset, Michael said. At your mother's apartment, she used to hide under the dining table when something bothered her. There's no place like that here in the building, Richard said impatiently. Yes, there is, Michael replied. The recreation room in the basement. There are several little corners where a small child could hide. The two men rushed toward the stairs, taking them 2 at a time. The recreation room was a space Richard had ordered, built for employees to relax during breaks, though it was rarely used. When they entered the dimly lit room, Michael turned on all the lights and began systematically checking possible hiding spots. Emily, he called softly. Emily, sweetheart, are you here? They heard a small sob coming from behind a couch in the corner of the room. Michael approached slowly and found Emily curled up in a tiny gap between the couch and the wall, clutching her teddy bear. Hi, Princess, Michael said gently, kneeling beside her. What are you doing here? I wanted to find you, Emily said between sobs. But I got lost and got scared. Richard stepped closer and saw his daughter in distress. His first impulse was to scold her for leaving the apartment alone, but seeing her tear-streaked face softened his heart. Emily, you scared Daddy so much, Richard said, kneeling on the other side of the girl. Why did you leave the apartment? Because I wanted to tell Uncle Michael something important, Emily said, looking between the two men. What did you want to say, sweetheart? Michael asked tenderly. I wanted to say that Daddy isn't mad at you, Emily said, her little voice still trembling, and that I love you both the same. The little girl's words struck both men like lightning. Here was a 5-year-old trying to resolve a conflict the adults couldn't handle. Emily, said Richard, his voice choked up. You don't need to worry about these things. It's the adult's job to solve problems. But I don't want you to be sad, said Emily. When you're sad, I get sad too. Michael looked at Richard and saw tears forming in the businessman's eyes. That child had spent 5 years observing the adults around her, absorbing their emotions, carrying their conflicts even without being able to express it verbally. Emily, Uncle Michael and I will talk and sort everything out, Richard promised. But you can never leave the apartment alone again. It was very dangerous. I know, Emily said softly. I got scared when I couldn't find Uncle Michael in the lobby. I was helping a lady with the elevators, Michael explained. But next time you want to talk to me, ask your dad or Dorothy to bring you, okay? Okay, Emily agreed, nestling between the two men. Richard looked at Michael over Emily's head and saw in the other man's eyes the same unconditional love he felt for his daughter. At that moment, he realized Michael wasn't a threat to his role as a father, but an ally who wanted the best for Emily. Michael, Richard said hesitantly, maybe we can talk more about this whole situation. Of course, Mr. Richard, Michael replied. Whenever you're ready. How about tonight? Richard suggested. After Emily goes to bed. That would be great, Michael said, clearly surprised by Richard's change in attitude. Let's go upstairs now, Richard said, picking Emily up. Dorothy must be frantic looking for you. When they returned to the apartment, they found Dorothy on the phone, clearly reporting Emily's disappearance to someone. Dorothy, it's all right, Richard said, interrupting the call. We found Emily. The nanny sighed in relief and immediately came over to check on the girl. Emily, you gave me such a fright, Dorothy said, hugging the child. Never do that again. I'm sorry, Aunt Dorothy, Emily said. I just wanted to talk to Uncle Michael. Richard realized he needed to return to his meeting with the investors, who had probably already left. When he reached the conference room, he found Melissa, his secretary, speaking with the Japanese businessman. "Mr. Miller," the delegation leader said when Richard appeared, "your secretary explained the emergency with your daughter. We hope everything is all right." "Yes, thank you," Richard replied, embarrassed. "I apologize for leaving the meeting like that." "On the contrary," the investor said, smiling. "A man who interrupts a business meeting to care for his daughter is exactly the kind of person we want to work with. That shows character." Richard was surprised by the investor's positive reaction. He'd spent his life putting work first, and now he was discovering that his humanity as a father was seen as a professional quality. "Can we reschedule the presentation for tomorrow?" the investor asked. "We'd like to learn more about your company and your work philosophy." "Of course," Richard replied, relieved. "It'll be a pleasure to have you back." After the investors left, Richard sat in his chair, trying to process everything that had happened in the last 48 hours. Emily had spoken for the first time. He'd reconnected with Michael, discovered his mother and wife had conspired against him, nearly lost his daughter, and yet still managed to impress important investors. Melissa knocked on the door before entering. "Mr. Richard, may I make an observation?" she asked. "Of course, Melissa," Richard replied. "In 10 years of working with you, I've never seen you as human as you were today," she said. "The investors were truly impressed by your attitude." "Human how?" asked Richard, curious. "Like a father who loves his daughter above any business," replied Melissa. "It's rare to see executives who show that kind of priority." Melissa's words made Richard reflect on how he had handled his professional and personal life. For years he had built an image of a cold, calculating businessman, but now he was discovering that his vulnerability as a father was seen as a strength, not a weakness. That night, after Emily fell asleep, Richard went down to the lobby to talk to Michael. The doorman was finishing his shift, organizing papers and keys before handing over to the night shift colleague. "Michael, can we talk now?" asked Richard. "Of course, Mr. Miller," replied Michael. "Can we go to the superintendent's office again?" The two men walked in silence to the small room. Richard had thought a lot about what he wanted to say, but now, face to face with Michael, the words seemed inadequate. "Michael, I want to apologize," said Richard, surprising the doorman. "I want to apologize for taking you out of Emily's life without understanding how much it would hurt her." Michael stayed silent for a moment, clearly moved by Richard's words. "Mr. Miller, you were protecting your daughter the way you thought was best," said Michael. "I understand that." "No, you don't," insisted Richard. "I wasn't protecting Emily. I was protecting my own ego. I was jealous of the bond you two had." Richard's brutal honesty left Michael speechless. He had never expected the businessman to admit something so personal. "Emily loves you in a special way," Richard continued, "and all these years I tried to deny it because I was afraid I wouldn't be enough as a father." "Mr. Miller, you are her father," said Michael. "Nothing will change that." "I know that now," said Richard. "But back then I felt threatened. You could do things with Emily that I couldn't. You made her smile when she was sad. You could calm her when she cried. I felt useless as a father." "But that doesn't mean you were a bad father," said Michael. "It just means Emily needed different kinds of support. You always gave her security, stability, all the material things she needed. And you gave her unconditional love," Richard finished. "The kind of love I didn't know how to show." "You love Emily just as much as I do," said Michael. "The difference is I wasn't afraid to show it." Michael's words struck Richard deeply. He realized his problem wasn't a lack of love for his daughter, but fear of showing vulnerability. "Michael, I want to make a proposal," said Richard after a moment of silence. "What kind of proposal?" asked Michael cautiously. "I want you to be part of Emily's life again," said Richard. "Not as an employee, but as family." Michael's eyes widened, clearly shocked by the suggestion. "Mr. Miller, I don't understand," he said. "Emily needs you," Richard explained. and I need to learn from you how to be a better father. Could we consider some kind of co-parenting?" The word sounded strange coming from Richard, but he knew it was the most fitting description for what he was proposing. "Mr. Miller, that's very generous, but—" Michael began. "It's not generosity," Richard interrupted. "It's necessity. Emily blossomed in just 2 days with you. Imagine what could happen if you could see each other regularly." "And Mrs. Jennifer?" asked Michael. "How would she feel about this?" "Jennifer supported hiring you for the building," Richard reminded him. "I'm sure she'd be happy to know Emily will have you back in her life." I don't know what to say," admitted Michael, visibly emotional. "Say you'll think about it," suggested Richard. "And tell him that no matter what you decide, you'll always be welcome in my daughter's life." Michael wiped the tears beginning to form in his eyes. "Mr. Richard, for 3 years, I dreamed of the possibility of watching Emily grow up," he said. "I never imagined you'd give me this opportunity." "I never imagined I'd offer it," Richard admitted. "But today I realized that being a father doesn't mean being the only important man in Emily's life. It means making sure she has all the people who love her around her." The two men looked at each other for a moment, a new understanding settling between them. "So, what's your answer?" Richard asked. "My answer is yes," Michael said, smiling through his tears. "Yes, I'd love to be part of Emily's life again." "Great," Richard said, extending his hand to Michael. "Welcome back to the family." As they shook hands, both knew this was the start of a new chapter in their lives. Richard had learned that strength as a father didn't come from controlling every aspect of Emily's life, but from ensuring she had access to all the love available. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. In the days that followed, the shift in the family dynamic was remarkable. Michael began visiting the apartment regularly after work, helping Emily with drawings and games, while Richard watched and learned. "Uncle Michael, teach Daddy how to do the dragon's voice in the story," Emily asked during a reading session. "Of course, Princess," Michael said, glancing at Richard. "Mr. Richard, want to give it a try?" Richard felt awkward at first, but seeing Emily's eager smile, he decided to try. When he growled the dragon's voice, Emily laughed so genuinely that Richard felt his heart warm. "Daddy, you're funny," Emily said, clapping. "See," Michael said, "you're really good at this. Emily loves it when adults play with her." Jennifer returned from Washington, D.C. at the end of the week and was moved to find the family transformed. Emily ran to hug her, excitedly telling her about everything that had happened. "Mommy, Daddy, and Uncle Michael are friends now," Emily announced, "and they're going to take care of me together." "That's wonderful, sweetheart," Jennifer said, giving Richard a meaningful look. "Did Daddy tell you this would happen?" "He did," Emily replied. "He said families can look different, and what matters is that everyone loves each other." Jennifer was impressed by the emotional maturity Richard had shown. Later, while Emily played with Michael in the living room, she pulled her husband aside. "I'm proud of you," she said, touching Richard's face. "I know how hard this decision was for you." "It was the right decision," Richard said. "Emily is happier than I've ever seen her." "And you?" Jennifer asked. "How are you feeling?" "Surprisingly good," Richard admitted. "I've realized that sharing fatherhood with Michael doesn't diminish my role as a dad. It actually makes me a better one." "Michael has always respected you as Emily's father," Jennifer reminded him. "He never tried to replace you." "I know that now," Richard said. "My fear was irrational." That evening, during family dinner, Emily asked a question that took everyone by surprise. "Daddy, why were you sad when I called Uncle Michael Daddy?" she asked innocently. Richard looked at Jennifer and Michael, all waiting for his answer. He had promised himself to always be honest with Emily, within the limits a 5-year-old could understand. "Because Daddy was jealous," Richard said honestly. "I wanted to be the only special person in your life." "But that's silly," said Emily, making everyone laugh. "I can love many people at the same time." "You're right," agreed Richard. "That was silly of me, but now I've learned." "And you won't be sad anymore if I call Uncle Michael Dad?" asked Emily. Richard looked at Michael, who was clearly waiting anxiously for his answer. "I won't be sad," Richard promised, "because now I understand you have enough room in your heart to love both of us." Emily clapped happily and stood up for a group hug, wrapping her small arms around Richard, Jennifer, and Michael. "Now our family is complete," she declared. The following weeks brought a new and harmonious routine. Michael continued working as the building's doorman, but now he was also part of family life. He had dinner with them twice a week, helped Emily with her homework, and joined in on weekend activities. Richard found that watching Michael and Emily interact was like getting free parenting lessons. Michael had endless patience, knew exactly how to motivate Emily when she was discouraged, and had a natural gift for making activities more fun. "How do you get her to brush her teeth without complaining?" Richard asked one day after watching Michael turn brushing into a musical game. "Kids respond better to playfulness than orders," Michael explained. "If you make chores fun, they do them willingly." "Where did you learn that?" Richard asked, genuinely curious. "Mostly by watching Emily," Michael admitted. "Every child is different, so you have to figure out what works specifically for them." Richard began applying the techniques he learned from Michael and was amazed by the results. Emily responded much better when he approached situations playfully and patiently. One day, Mrs. Elizabeth Miller came to visit the family and was moved to see the harmony that had settled in. "I knew you could work this out," she told Richard. "Emily needs both of you." "You were right, Mom," Richard admitted. "I was being stubborn and prideful." "What matters is that you recognized it and changed," Mrs. Elizabeth said. "Not everyone has the courage to admit they were wrong." "Michael helped me understand that being a father isn't a competition," Richard said. "It's about giving Emily everything she needs to be happy." Mrs. Elizabeth looked at her grandson, who was teaching Emily to play checkers at the living room table. "Michael is a special man," she said. "Always has been. It took you a while to see it, but you got there." "And you were key to making it happen," Richard acknowledged. "If you hadn't hired Michael to work in the building, maybe Emily would never have spoken." "Sometimes grandmothers know what's best for their grandchildren," Mrs. Elizabeth said with a mischievous smile. "Sometimes," Richard agreed, hugging his mother. At school, Emily's transformation was also remarkable. Her teacher, Sarah, requested a meeting with Richard and Jennifer to discuss the changes in the girl's behavior. "Emily is unrecognizable," Sarah said. "She's gone from being completely silent to one of the most engaged students in class." "And that's a good thing?" Jennifer asked. "Extremely good," the teacher replied. "She's developing socially at a rapid pace. She's made several friends and is expressing herself very well verbally." "Does she talk about her family at school?" Richard asked curiously. "Yes, and it's interesting," Sarah said. "She always mentions her two dads. At first I thought you were divorced and she was referring to a stepfather, but then I realized it's a different situation." "How so?" Jennifer asked. "Emily explains to her classmates that she has two dads in her heart," the teacher said. "She talks about Daddy Richard, who is her real father, and Daddy Michael, who also takes care of her. To her, it's completely natural." "And the other children accept this well?" asked Richard. "Perfectly," replied Sarah. "Children are much more open to different family setups than adults. To them, what matters is that Emily is loved and cared for." The conversation with the teacher eased Richard's concerns about how people might react to their family situation. At work, Richard's change in attitude was also noticeable. He became more patient with employees, more willing to listen to suggestions, and showed a warmth that hadn't been there before. During a meeting with the engineering team, one employee had to leave to pick up his sick child from school. Instead of showing irritation, as he would have in the past, Richard simply said, "Go get your son. We'll reschedule the meeting for tomorrow." Melissa, who witnessed the moment, remarked afterward, "Mr. Richard, you've changed, more understanding." "I've learned family comes first," said Richard. "If I want my employees to give their best at work, I need to respect their family responsibilities." "This is having a very positive impact on the workplace," Melissa noted. "People are more motivated and productive." Richard realized his personal transformation was positively affecting every part of his life. Being a better father had also made him a better boss, a more present husband, and a more complete person. A month after reconnecting with Michael, Richard decided to do something he'd never considered before: propose a change in Michael's work arrangement. "Michael, I want to make a professional proposal to you," Richard said during a family dinner. "What kind of proposal?" asked Michael, intrigued. "I'd like you to consider working directly for me," said Richard. "Not as a driver, but as a special assistant for family matters." "Mr. Richard, I don't understand," Michael replied. "Our company is growing fast," Richard explained. "I'm thinking of creating a support program for employees' families, someone who understands child development and can help working parents in the company." "Is this real?" Michael asked, clearly surprised. "Completely real," Richard confirmed. "You have a natural gift with children and families. It'd be a waste not to use that professionally. But I don't have formal training in this field." Michael hesitated. "You have something better," said Richard. "You have hands-on experience and a genuine heart. I can arrange courses and formal training if you accept." Jennifer and Emily watched the conversation with interest. Emily, who only partly understood what was being discussed, decided to share her thoughts. "Uncle Michael, would you work closer to us?" she asked. "If I accept your dad's offer, yes," Michael replied. "Then you have to say yes," Emily declared. "That way you can pick me up from school sometimes." Everyone laughed at the girl's simple logic, but Richard realized she'd touched on an important point. "Actually, that would be part of the role," Richard said. "Coordinating activities for employees' children, involving their families in company events." "Mr. Richard, this is a dream I didn't even know I had," Michael admitted. "Of course I accept." "Great," Richard said, extending his hand. "Welcome officially to the team." Michael's career change brought even more stability to their new family dynamic. Now he had more flexible hours, could be more involved in Emily's routine, and was building a career in a field he truly loved. The family support program Michael implemented at Richard's company was an immediate success. Employees who were fathers reported significant improvement in work-life balance, and the company's overall productivity increased. "Michael, the results of your program exceeded all expectations," said Richard during an evaluation meeting. "You have a real talent for this." "Thank you, Mr. Richard," replied Michael. "It's rewarding to help other families find harmony." "Have you ever considered formally studying in this field?" Richard asked. "I have, actually," Michael admitted. "I'd like to take courses in child psychology or family therapy." "The company could sponsor your education," Richard offered. "It's a worthwhile investment." "Mr. Richard, you've already done so much for me," Michael said. "I can't accept more." "Michael, you're misunderstanding," Richard replied. "This isn't charity. It's a professional investment. The more qualified you are, the better it is for the company and all the families you help." Richard's generosity knew no bounds when it came to people who mattered to Emily. Michael was far more than an employee. He was family. 6 months after their reunion, the family celebrated Emily's 6th birthday with a party that reflected their new reality. Michael helped organize everything, from decorations to activities for the young guests. "Daddy Richard," Emily said during the party, "can I make a special wish?" "Of course, sweetheart," Richard answered. "What is it?" "I want Daddy Michael to live with us," Emily said, surprising everyone. "That way, our family can always be together." The little girl's innocent suggestion created an awkward silence. Richard glanced at Jennifer and then at Michael, searching for the right response. "Emily," Jennifer said gently, "Uncle Michael has his own home. He can't leave Grandma and his cousins who live with him." "But they could move in with us too," Emily suggested with childlike logic. "Our house is big." Michael chuckled at the idea, but Richard sensed a practical concern behind Emily's request. She wanted to ensure Michael would always be there for her. "Emily, even if he doesn't live here, Uncle Michael will always be part of your life," Richard promised. "He'll visit often, and you can see him too." "Promise?" Emily asked, holding out her pinky. "I promise," Richard said, linking his finger with hers. "What about you, Daddy Michael? Do you promise too?" Emily asked. "I promise, sweetheart," Michael said, joining the pinky ritual. "I'll always be here for you." Jennifer watched the scene with emotion. Seeing the two most important men in Emily's life publicly commit to her well-being was a moment she wanted to cherish forever. After the party, once the guests had left, the family gathered in the living room to discuss Emily's request. "Do you think we should consider her suggestion?" Jennifer asked, surprising Richard and Michael. "What do you mean?" Richard asked. "Not necessarily all living under one roof," Jennifer clarified, "but maybe moving to a place with more space where Michael could have his own apartment nearby." "Jennifer, that's very generous, but—" Michael began. "It's not generosity," Jennifer interrupted. "It's practicality. Emily is thriving with this new family dynamic. Why not make it even easier?" Richard was taken aback by his wife's suggestion, but the more he thought about it, the more it made sense. "Actually," Richard said slowly, "I've been considering buying that estate in Westlake Hills we saw last month. There's enough space to build a guest house." "Daddy, are you serious?" Emily asked, who had been quietly listening to the adults. "I'm seriously considering it," Richard confirmed, "but only if Uncle Michael agrees." Michael remained silent for a long moment, visibly moved by the proposal. "Mr. Richard, Mrs. Jennifer, this would be perfect," he finally said. "My mother would love to have a quieter place to live, and my nephews would have space to play." "Then it's settled," said Jennifer. "Let's start looking for the perfect property." Emily jumped for joy and ran to hug all three adults at once. "Now our family will be even more special," she declared. The search for the ideal property took 2 months, but when they found the perfect ranch, everyone immediately knew it was the right place. 15,000 square meters of green space, a spacious main house, and the perfect spot to build a second home. During the purchase process and construction planning, Richard and Michael worked side by side, making joint decisions about what their expanded family's new home would look like. "Michael, I want you to know this doesn't change our professional relationship," Richard said during one of their visits to the property. "At work, I'm still your boss." "Understood, Mr. Richard," Michael replied with a smile. "And at home, we're still co-parents to Emily." "Exactly," Richard confirmed. "Each setting has its own rules." The construction of the additional house took 6 months. During that time, the family rented a temporary home near the property to closely monitor the progress. Emily loved visiting the construction site and imagining life in their new home. "Daddy Michael, will your room be close to mine?" she asked during one visit. "It'll be in the house next door, Princess," Michael explained, "but not too far. I'll hear you if you call." "And can I visit you anytime?" Emily pressed. "Whenever your parents say yes," Michael replied. Richard watched their interaction and felt an inner peace he hadn't experienced in years. All the anxiety and jealousy he once felt had been replaced by gratitude and contentment. The move to the ranch was celebrated by the whole family. Mrs. Elizabeth Miller, Dorothy, and even Melissa came to help with the move and celebrate this new chapter. "Richard," Mrs. Elizabeth said during the housewarming lunch, "I'm proud of the person you've become." "Thank you, Mum," Richard replied. "I've learned that being strong doesn't mean being rigid. And I've learned that love grows when it's shared," he added, watching Emily play in the garden with Michael. Life at the ranch brought an unmatched quality of life for the whole family. Emily had space to run and play, Jennifer could work from home more often, and Richard discovered a new hobby, gardening. Michael adapted perfectly to country life. His mother, Mrs. Margaret, a 68-year-old woman with health issues, improved significantly in the peaceful environment. Michael's nephews, Brandon and Olivia, ages 8 and 10, became Emily's constant playmates. "Uncle Michael," Emily said one day while helping water the plants, "do I have brothers and sisters now?" "Brandon and Olivia are your heart cousins," Michael explained, "just like I'm your heart daddy." "I like this heart family," Emily said. "It's bigger and more fun." Her innocent observation perfectly captured what everyone felt. The traditional family had evolved into something much richer and more complex, but also far more loving. A year after moving to the ranch, Richard received a call that would once again change their family dynamics. It was from the hospital where Mrs. Margaret, Michael's mother, was admitted for a routine surgery. "Mr. Richard," the doctor's voice said, "I'm calling because Mr. Michael is listed as your employee, and you're listed as emergency contacts." "What happened?" Richard asked, concerned. "His mother had some complications during the surgery," the doctor explained. Nothing serious, but she'll need special care during recovery. Is Michael at the hospital? Asked Richard. Yes, but he seems very worried about the children being left alone, replied the doctor. Tell him not to worry about that, Richard said immediately. The kids can stay with us as long as needed. When Richard arrived at the hospital, he found Michael in the hallway, clearly distressed. Mr. Richard, thank you for coming, Michael said. I didn't know what to do with Brandon and Olivia. They're already playing with Emily at home, Richard reassured him. Jennifer picked them up from school. But what if my mother's recovery takes longer? Michael asked anxiously. Michael, stop worrying about that, Richard said firmly. Your family is our family. We'll take care of everything. The emergency situation revealed once again how much their family had transformed. It wasn't just Richard accepting Michael into Emily's life. It was the whole family supporting each other in times of need. Mrs. Margaret was hospitalized for 2 weeks, and during that time, Brandon and Olivia lived full-time with Richard's family. The experience was so positive that when Mrs. Margaret was discharged, the children asked to keep spending nights at the main house. Uncle Richard, Brandon said one day, can I really call you Uncle? Of course you can, Richard replied, touched by the boy's request. And can I call Aunt Jennifer Aunt? Olivia asked. Absolutely, Jennifer said, hugging the little girl. Emily watched the whole interaction with a satisfied smile. Now, our family is really complete, she declared. Richard realized his daughter was right. What had started as a traumatic reunion between Emily and Michael had evolved into the creation of an extended family built on love, respect, and mutual support. 2 years after their first meeting in the building lobby, the family celebrated a major milestone: Emily's kindergarten graduation. The little girl, now 7, had grown into a confident, articulate, and socially well-adjusted child. For the ceremony, Emily prepared a special speech that surprised everyone. My name is Emily Miller, she began, standing on the small school stage, and I want to thank the most important people in my life. The audience quieted to listen. First, I want to thank my mommy, Jennifer, who teaches me to be strong and independent, Emily said, looking at her mother in the crowd. I want to thank my dad, Richard, who protects me and gives me everything I need, she continued, turning to her father. And I want to thank my dad, Michael, who taught me to speak and never gave up on me, she added, searching for Michael in the audience. Many in the crowd were moved to hear Emily refer to 2 fathers so naturally and lovingly. I also want to thank Grandma Elizabeth, who's the wisest of all, Emily said, drawing laughter from the audience. And last, I want to thank my cousins Brandon and Olivia, who taught me that families can grow when there's enough love. The audience applauded enthusiastically. In the front row, Richard and Michael sat side by side, both with tears in their eyes. Michael, Richard whispered, thank you for saving my daughter. Thank you for letting me be part of her life, Michael replied. Emily stepped down from the stage and ran to hug her whole family at once. Jennifer, Richard, Michael, Mrs. Elizabeth, Brandon and Olivia joined in a group embrace that symbolized everything they had built together. Daddy Richard, Emily whispered in her father's ear, you're the bravest daddy in the world. Why, Princess? Richard asked. Because you were brave enough to share your love for me, Emily answered with the simple wisdom of a child. The daughter's words touched Richard deeply. He had spent his life trying to control and protect, but he had discovered that true courage lay in trusting and sharing. After the ceremony, the family went to dinner at a special restaurant to celebrate. During the meal, Emily made an announcement that surprised everyone. I've decided what I want to be when I grow up, she said. What do you want to be? Everyone asked at once. I want to help other families find each other, Emily replied. Just like Dad Michael helped me find my voice, and Dad Richard learned to share love. Emily's answer moved everyone. At just 7 years old, she already understood the value of family unity and wanted to dedicate her life to helping others discover it too. That's a beautiful idea, sweetheart, Richard said. And you know we'll support any dream you have. We all will, Michael added. And when you make that dream come true, Jennifer said, you'll have the best support team in the world. Emily smiled and looked around the table at all the people she loved. I already have the best team in the world, she said. You're my heart family. That night, when they returned home, Richard stayed in the garden for a few minutes, gazing at the two lit-up houses. In the main house, Jennifer was helping Emily get ready for bed. In the guest house, Michael was talking with his mother and helping Brandon and Olivia with their homework. It was a scene of domestic harmony he never could have imagined years ago. His journey from a controlling businessman to a collaborative father had transformed not only his relationship with Emily, but the entire structure of their family. Jennifer came over and took his hand. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. "I'm thinking that sometimes life's greatest gifts come disguised as problems," Richard replied. "How so?" Jennifer asked. "If Michael hadn't come back into our lives, Emily might never have spoken," Richard explained. "If I hadn't been forced to face my fears, I never would have learned to be a better father. And our family never would have grown in this wonderful way," Jennifer added. "Exactly," Richard agreed. "Sometimes we have to lose control to find happiness." That night, before bed, Emily appeared in her parents' room with a question. "Dad, Mom, can I tell you something?" she said. "Of course, sweetheart," Jennifer replied. "What is it?" "I want you to know I'm the happiest girl in the world," Emily said, "because I have the most special family ever." "We're the happiest people in the world too," Richard said, hugging his daughter, "because we have you." "And because we've learned that love grows when it's shared," Jennifer added. Emily nestled between her parents, completely content and secure in her world of multiplied love. Across the garden, in the guest house, Michael was also getting ready for bed when Brandon asked a similar question. "Uncle Michael, do you think it was the right choice to come live here?" the boy asked. "Why do you ask?" Michael replied. "Because now we're really happy," Brandon said. "And sometimes I'm afraid I'll wake up and find out it was just a dream." Michael smiled and hugged his nephew. "It's not a dream, Brandon," he reassured him. "This is our real life, and we'll take good care of it so it stays this way." "Forever?" Olivia asked, overhearing the conversation. "Forever," Michael promised. The next morning, the whole family gathered for breakfast on the main house's porch, a weekend tradition they'd started. Emily was especially excited because she had news to share. "Everyone, I have something important to tell you," she announced. "What is it?" they all asked, curious. "My new teacher wants to meet all of you," Emily said. "She said she's never met a family as special as ours." "What did you tell her about our family?" asked Richard, curious. "I told her I have two dads who love each other like brothers, a mum who's the smartest in the world, a grandma who knows everything, two cousins who are my best friends, and a Grandma Margaret who makes the best chocolate cake," Emily recounted. "And what did she say?" asked Jennifer. "She said, 'Families of the heart are the strongest of all,'" Emily replied, "and that she wants to learn from you how to make a family work so well." The teacher's words, as shared by Emily, confirmed what everyone already knew. They had created something special and rare, a family that thrived on love, respect, communication, and collaboration. "Of course, we'll meet your teacher," said Richard. "It'll be a pleasure." "And we'll tell her our secret," added Michael. "What secret?" asked Emily, curious. "The secret that love doesn't shrink when it's shared," Michael explained. "It multiplies." "And that families can take whatever shape works best for their members," Jennifer added. "And that sometimes we need to be brave enough to change," Richard finished. Emily absorbed these lessons with the seriousness of someone far older than her 7 years. "I'll teach these secrets to other kids when I grow up," she declared. "I'm sure you will," said Richard, kissing the top of his daughter's head. As the years passed, the family continued to grow and evolve. Michael graduated in child psychology, with Richard's company sponsoring his studies. Their family support program expanded to other businesses in town. Brandon and Olivia grew alongside Emily as siblings, all raised in an environment of unconditional love and mutual support. Richard became a respected businessman, not just for his profits but for the humane way he ran his company. His story with Michael and Emily became an example of how flexibility and humility could turn conflicts into opportunities for growth. Jennifer expanded her architecture firm, specializing in designing spaces that fostered family togetherness. Her own life experiences inspired her projects. Emily grew into an extraordinarily empathetic and communicative child. Her selective mutism became a distant memory, replaced by a vibrant and loving personality. And Michael, who had started as a driver, became a respected expert in child development and family dynamics, with his personal story inspiring many other families. On Emily's 10th birthday, she asked for a special themed party, Families of the Heart. She invited children from all kinds of family backgrounds, kids of divorced parents, adopted children, those raised by grandparents, single-parent families, to celebrate the diversity of family love. During the party, Emily gave a speech that moved everyone present. "Today, I want to celebrate something very special," she said to the crowd of children and adults. "I want to celebrate that families can be made in so many different ways, but what matters is the love between people. My family started small and grew because my parents were brave enough to let love in," she continued. "And today I want you all to know that no matter what your family looks like, what matters is that you love and care for each other." The applause was heartfelt and long-lasting. In the crowd, Richard and Michael exchanged a proud smile, marveling at the extraordinary girl they had raised together. That night, after all the guests had left, the family gathered in the living room to talk about the day. "Emily," said Richard, "your speech today was wonderful. Where did you learn all those things?" "I learned by watching you," Emily replied simply. "I learned that Daddy had the courage to change, that Daddy Michael never gave up on me, and that Mom always knew our family was incomplete until we were all together." "And what else did you learn?" Jennifer asked. "I learned that problems can turn into gifts when people choose love over fear," Emily said, showing wisdom beyond her years. Michael was deeply moved by her words. Seeing the quiet little girl he had left years ago blossom into such a wise and articulate young woman was the fulfillment of all his dreams. "Emily," Michael said, "you taught me just as much as I taught you." "What did I teach you?" Emily asked curiously. "You taught me that we should never give up on the people we love," Michael replied, "and that sometimes miracles happen when we least expect them." "Like when I spoke for the first time?" Emily asked. "Exactly like when you spoke for the first time," Michael confirmed. Richard watched the interaction between Michael and Emily, feeling profound gratitude for having had the courage to open his heart and his family to this extraordinary man. "Michael," Richard said, "I want to thank you for teaching me how to be a better father. And I want to thank you for giving me the chance to be part of Emily's life," Michael replied. "And I want to thank you both for giving me the most beautiful family in the world," Emily said, hugging the two men she considered her fathers. Jennifer watched the scene and smiled, knowing this was the perfect picture of how love can transform and heal when given freely and unconditionally. As Emily continued to grow, her unique personality flourished. She became a natural bridge between different groups of children at school, always helping resolve conflicts and including those who felt left out. Her teachers often remarked on her exceptional emotional maturity and her ability to understand and accept differences. Emily had become a living example of how a loving, stable family can raise a confident and empathetic child. In her teens, Emily decided to write a book about her family experience for a school project. The book, titled Two Dads, One Heart, went viral on social media and was eventually officially published, with all profits donated to organizations supporting non-traditional families. The book's success led Emily, now 16, to be invited to speak at schools and events about family diversity. Her message was always the same: love knows no boundaries or traditional definitions. Richard, watching his daughter grow into an influential and respected young woman, often reflected on how different his life might have been if he hadn't found the courage to change that fateful day in the building lobby. In an interview for a television program about unconventional families, Emily, now 18 and about to start college for psychology, summarized her life philosophy. "People always ask me if it's confusing to have two dads," she told the interviewer, "but I always say what's confusing is limiting love. When you understand that love can grow and multiply, everything becomes very simple." "And what advice would you give to families going through similar situations?" the interviewer pressed. "My advice is, have the courage to choose love, Emily replied. My biological father had to overcome his pride and fears. My father by heart had to have patience and perseverance. My mother had to trust the wisdom of her heart, and I had to learn to express my feelings. And the result was, the interviewer pushed. The result was that we built something far stronger and more beautiful than any of us could have imagined alone, concluded Emily. The interview went viral and inspired hundreds of families across the country to rethink their own dynamics and prejudices. On the day of Emily's high school graduation, she was chosen as the class speaker. In her speech, she spoke about the importance of embracing change and growth. 18 years ago, a tiny little girl finally found her voice, she began. But the truth is, we all found our voices that day. My dad learned to speak the language of humility. My other dad learned to speak the language of patience. My mum learned to speak the language of wisdom. And today, as we leave school and step into the adult world, I want us all to remember that our most important voice is the one that chooses love over fear, unity over division, and growth over stagnation. The audience rose in a standing ovation that lasted 5 minutes. In the crowd, Richard, Jennifer, and Michael stood, applauding with tears of pride streaming down their faces. After the ceremony, the family gathered at home for an intimate celebration. Emily, now an 18-year-old young woman, looked around the table at all the people who had shaped her life. I'd like to make a toast, she said, raising her glass of juice. What shall we toast to? Asked Richard. To the most important day of my life, Emily replied. Which day? Everyone asked. The day I ran into Dad Michael's arms in the building lobby and changed our family forever, she answered. Everyone raised their glasses and toasted the moment that had transformed their lives so profoundly. And now, Emily said, let's toast to the future, where I'll take everything I've learned from you to help other families find their own happiness. It was a toast to the past that had shaped them, the present they had built together, and the future they would continue to write as a family bound by unconditional love. The end. We hope this story touched your heart as deeply as it touched ours. Tell us in the comments, do you think Richard made the right choice by welcoming Michael back into Emily's life? Have you ever faced a situation where you had to choose between pride and love? Share your experience with us. We love reading your stories. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more narratives that celebrate the transformative power of family love.